Every technology disrupts certain industries in unthinkable ways, and there is always collateral damage. That's just an unfortunate consequence of something that is better, faster, or cheaper. We've just seen that happen repeatedly, and you kind of have to just accept that that's the case. I think people having sound money, it frees up everything else. You're not in this constant struggle or this constant hamster wheel.
You're listening to the Great Reassessment Podcast.
Are you stacking Bitcoin but still no friends? It's time to download Club Orange, the home base for true Bitcoiners. With Club Orange, you can ditch the noise, the lonely doom scrolling, and join a real, in-person community built for people who actually get it. You can enjoy time spent with local Bitcoiners who believe in the same sound money principles as you do. I've been using it for almost 2 years. I've been able to attend over 24 local meetups, and I've created lifelong friendships. Download Club Orange today and get connected. Are you tired of eating fiat food? Get your beef and pork today from Acme Acres in Spirit Lake, Idaho, where every cow is grass-fed, vaccine-free, and raised the way nature intended. My buddy Jason Hanley, he runs the place, and yeah, they even accept Bitcoin. Guys, I eat this meat, I feed it to my kids. It's amazing. You gotta try it. It's pure beef, no nonsense, shipped nationwide. Visit acmeacres.us today and taste what sound money should taste like. Anil, it's good to see you again. Welcome to the Great Reassessment Podcast.
Matthew, great to see you. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah, you and I met at BTC in DC, and we just struck up a conversation. And yeah, it was great to meet you and acquire one of your books, which I've been reading in the meantime. My first question for you is, I do this with on a lot of Bitcoin podcasts, but what have you been meditating on as of lately as it relates to Bitcoin?
Well, I guess let's talk about how we met. So we met at a conference, and I always encourage Bitcoiners to get out to conferences and meet people in person, shake hands, build real life connections in the meet space. And, I think we hit it off talking about family and raising young kids. And so for me, that's become a big priority in my life. And sound money or saving in sound money enables you to do that, to kind of get some of your time back. So, you could read endless books about Bitcoin and monetary history and innovation and technology, till the cows come home. But once you've kind of hit that threshold of diminishing returns, I think then it's kind of time, focus on yourself, focus on your family, actually use the knowledge and time and wisdom to put back into the people you love and care about. So that's what's been a priority for me lately.
Yeah, you articulated that really well. And that's something I've been feeling as well, is this, you can read every Bitcoin book, you can watch every podcast, but at the end of the day, it's like, how is it actually affecting the way you live? And right, we're trying to, Bitcoiners are concerned with carrying value forward into the future. And yeah, like having kids and wanting to see them have a prosperous future, like it just makes it so tangible. And so, yeah, you're right. We did connect over that. And so how's your family doing?
Yeah, they're doing well, and the amount of time I guess you get when your kids are young is so fleeting. There's so many great graphics illustrating that most of the time you have with your kids is like 0 to 5. So make use of it. So I'm just trying to take that to heart. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, kids are doing well. Family's doing well. Yeah, they're right at, my oldest is right at that almost at that 5-year mark. Yeah, I think back about how like fast it's gone by. Like it feels like just yesterday my oldest daughter was born. I'm just like, man, we just have to do this cycle 3 or 4 more times, and it's like she's gonna be an adult. Like we just have to redo what we've already done 3 more times, and she's well off into adulthood. And it just went by like that. So it's kind of relating it to like the Bitcoin cycle. How many cycles have you been in? Like if you just sort of think of it that way with your kids, it's like, man, it's going to go by so fast. Yeah, my wife and I joke, it's like talking about, are we going to have more kids? What are we going to do? So it's fun, but it makes you feel how fast time goes by.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this big week in Bitcoin, it was a big week in Bitcoin because Square and Jack Dorsey unleashed Bitcoin Lightning payments for over 4 million merchants who use Square as their POS system for retailers, merchants. What are your reactions to all that? There's been a lot of buzz on X. What are your
Yeah.
reactions?
So, I mean, this was kind of the end goal many, many years in the making, right? I mean, you think of how long Jack Dorsey's been a Bitcoiner and, his influence over Square, and how they operate, wanting to get to this point and, all the steps that it took to get here, be it Square holding Bitcoin on its balance sheet, the number of sort of, I guess, soft launches at conferences, kind of testing this out, the Square to do it, given the market share they have, especially in the US, is just massive news. But you run a business. You have Square as your processor. I want to hear what it's been like for you.
Yeah, well, it's been really cool. For the first 2 months of our business, and my brother and I, we own a bake shop. For anybody who doesn't know that, we started out with Clover, and there's a few of these like big companies like Clover, Toast, Square, and we went with Clover because that's what the previous owner used, and it was just sort of easy to like transition with the same software. But then when we heard that Bitcoin payments were going to be unrolled, like, man, we got to just move to Square. And so I think it was like 4 or 5 days before they unrolled the Bitcoin payments and that went live. My brother was on the phone with Clover saying, "Yeah, we're canceling because you guys don't accept Bitcoin payments." And so I think a lot of people are getting the message over there, like, man, maybe we should actually start adopting this because we're losing customers. But yeah, day one, November 10th, we had 2 customers who came and paid with Bitcoin. And I was amazed at just how fast and seamless it was. Like, we accepted Bitcoin prior to that, but it was through a whole separate system. But now just to have it at the same panel where the customer's already going to use their credit card or tap to pay, and it feels like you are just, it's so integrated, like it's seamless, it works flawlessly. The transactions are settled in the blink of an eye. And for customers who aren't paying with Bitcoin, it's a touch point for them. We have stickers on our shop that say Bitcoin preferred, Bitcoin accepted here. And some people think it's really cool. Some people think, man, is Bitcoin, is that still a thing? And you realize just the sheer number of people who just still have no idea, who they're not even considering Bitcoin as a viable savings mechanism or a form of payment. And so we get to have those touch points. Some people need 100 touch points before they actually see the light with Bitcoin. And so it's just a well-rounded, overall fun experience. But we're also excited just how it helps us as a business too, like holding on to these sats. And there's some built-in features with Square where we can convert a percentage of our daily sales into Bitcoin and store them and kind of start our own Bitcoin treasury, which, you wrote a book on that. So yeah, it's
Let
just
a
been,
thousand treasuries bloom.
yes. So it's just been really cool as a business. And there's only a few of us in town here, but I mean, it's so easy. Like, it's so easy to turn on. So I'm just thankful that they made that feature available.
Yeah, amazing. That's great to hear.
Yeah. So you wrote this book. It came out this year, The Treasury of Michael Saylor. Tell you, one of my favorite things about it is like I can read a couple chapters and put it down, pick it back up, because the chapters actually aren't that long. What was part of your mindset going into writing that book?
Wanted a book that was just very easy to digest, that kind of felt like skiing downhill. So how do you just remove all the friction for someone to get through a book? Short chapters are helpful. You jump around a lot. You don't have to read it from start to finish, and try to use just very accessible language.
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin doesn't need to be complex. It could be understood by anyone. It just has to be communicated the right way. And I think that's why Michael Saylor has been so effective, is he communicates Bitcoin in a way that anyone can grasp in terms of the analogies he uses, the stories he relates it to. So it was, how do you capture that and put it into a book? So that was the objective.
Yeah. I heard you on Preston Pish's podcast where you were talking about how you wrote the book for yourself first, which is different than a lot of authors. You know, they're writing for a certain audience. And can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that was actually my first book. But again,
Oh, you
both,
weren't talking
both
about this
books,
one.
yeah,
Okay.
both books though, you're right. Like I just wrote them because no one else was going to, and that was the book I wanted to exist. You know, you've got your library there behind you, and when I look at my kind of say Bitcoin library and I look at the gaps, like okay, what's missing on this shelf to tie this all together?
Hmm.
Or if I'm trying to, you know, help someone get from A to B and I want to gift them a book, what would be the perfect fit? You know, you're almost like prescribing them medication in a way. Here's what will help your logic, you know, tighten. So yeah, both books were just a product of this is what I would like to read. This is what I wish someone would make, but no one was going to do it, so I did.
Okay.
Very
Okay.
selfish.
Hey, I mean, that's you create something for yourself, but other people find value in it, and that's how a lot of things are, you know, like inventors invent something because they have a creative bug in them, and guess what? Like other people are blessed because of it. I was going through your Twitter, and you had a tweet where you gave a presentation to your MBA class about where to buy Bitcoin, how to buy it, and the price. It was obviously a lot less than it is now. So, what year specifically did you get introduced to Bitcoin, and what made you curious to go a little deeper than the normal person would have to eventually
Yeah.
become super convicted in it?
For sure. So my first ever like touch point with Bitcoin, can't remember the exact year, but I remember the price and Bitcoin was $90. A family friend had mentioned it to me. And I thought that's kind of interesting. Like I was running a small business at the time and it was very difficult interacting with banks. Even though I had a very profitable online business, that was still a very new concept to the bank I was with at the time. So in terms of getting credit for inventory or just having certain financial transactions happen, they were very skeptical because they just didn't understand it. So I was used to being seen as an outcast, even though I knew I was running a very responsible, profitable business. So when I heard about a form of digital cash that was, sending it was as easy as sending an email and receiving it. It was permissionless. It was global. It just made sense. And then I did nothing with that information. A few weeks or months later, I heard that Bitcoin had cracked $100. I think it went up to $110. And I thought, oh, I've missed it. That's kind of it. You know, it's done. And then put that on the shelf for another, few months or few years. I didn't really start taking it seriously until about 2013, where during my business school program, I had to do a project around innovation. And, there was about 60 of us in the class. And the professor didn't want anyone doubling up. Everyone was kind of picking, the usual 3D printing. Some did AI even back then, biotech, all these kind of, things that were in vogue back then. And no one was really interested in Bitcoin at all. I mean, I'd say only maybe half had even heard of it. And I was quite lucky. This was in Vancouver, and Vancouver actually had the first Bitcoin ATM in the world. It had one of the first Bitcoin university clubs. So it was very accessible if you lived here. And I just decided I was going to do my project around Bitcoin. That sent me on a bit of a journey down a bit of a rabbit hole. I'd already interacted with the Bitcoin network prior to. So yeah, it was very early days. It was definitely seen as less reputable than what it is today as both a brand and as a technology. It was very immature back then. There were a lot of ways to lose your sats if you did something incorrectly or missed a keystroke. So yeah, it was looking back now and getting to see how a technology matures and develops has been really useful because you see how it mirrors in history and you can kind of spot what might happen in the future.
Yeah. Are there what technologies of the past come to mind as you sort of talk
Yeah.
about those mirrors?
I mean, the most obvious one is really the internet. in how, once we had computers and we could connect them together to form some kind of network to communicate packets of data, well, there were just clear efficiencies there, right? People are part of that network. As it grows, as bandwidth increases, as the forms of communication increase, well, those people are going to have an advantage over those who are not part of such a network. So just kind of thinking, when you're talking about accepting Bitcoin at your bake shop and you're now, working with two different systems. One system is open and continually innovating and getting better over time and more user friendly. The other one is contracting and tightening, right? The users of that system have more and more restrictions put on them. It's getting more and more fragmented. It's just kind of clear
Mm-hmm.
which one might win long term. So yeah, I'd most compare it to the internet.
Yeah. One thing that is kind of interesting is like when you look at technologies, one of my favorite authors that he's dead now, but his name's Neil Postman, and he writes a lot about technology's impact on a society. And he says that every technology, and I know some people say, well, Bitcoin's not a technology, it's a protocol, but for the sake of the conversation, we can just talk about it like a technology, that every technology giveth and taketh away. And, he'll talk about things like the telephone, right? It allows you to call people without having to leave your home, but what does it take away? Well, it takes away a person's maybe neighborhood cohesion, right? You no longer have to go to your neighbor's house to knock on the door and borrow that cup of sugar, right? And so just those natural conversations that might happen and foster a neighborly sense of goodwill and knowing your neighbors. Because today people might live in the suburbs, they don't even know who lives across the street. And so there's this give and take with technology. Do you see any give and take with Bitcoin? Like, do you think that there's obviously it gives people more autonomy, more sovereignty, more freedom? But do you think that there could be any things that we might not be conscientious of that it takes away that come to mind?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I've not really thought about that. In my mind, it's always been, well, fiat is the take and Bitcoin is the give it. And I mean, you know, every technology disrupts certain industries in unthinkable ways, and there is always collateral damage. And that's just an unfortunate consequence of something that is better, faster, or cheaper. We've just seen that happen repeatedly, and you kind of have to just accept that that's the case. I think people having sound money, it frees up everything else. You're not in this constant struggle or this constant hamster wheel that you're then able to more consciously choose how to use your time, which then I believe our natural tendency is to get back to those, neighborhood connections and knowing your neighbors. And I believe, well, just anecdotally from the Bitcoiners I know and have met over the years, that's kind of the future they want. And that's a big part of, you know, the mental freedom and bandwidth you get back from saving sound money and having certainty around, your future finances and purchasing power. So yeah, it's a great question. I think it's definitely like a net positive, but I'm sure Bitcoin's going to, there will definitely be a lot of collateral damage as a result.
Yeah, it's an interesting inquiry. It doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin is not worth pursuing, but it's just to at least be aware. That's just something that I've been meditating on a little bit because, yeah, we today, at least in the West, the fascination with technology, right? Like it has almost become very religious, where technology has taken on an agenda of its own, and it's progress for the sake of progress. And humans, like mankind, we don't necessarily use technology as a tool for its intended purpose anymore. Like one thing, like a hammer, think of a hammer, right? A hammer is a tool and it has a very narrow purpose. You can use a hammer to do one thing, and when you're done with it, you put it down and you don't use it until you need it again. As technology goes from more primitive technologies to more advanced, like electronics and things like that, and they become more integrated with our lives, these things that are set out to be tools, we end up becoming subservient to them. And one example of that is like just a shortened attention span. TikTok and social media, the tool, I guess, the purpose would be to communicate with more people across space and time. But one of the necessary requisites to like interact with it is like you have to be able to like think in shorter spurts of time. And over time, like we see some of the effects with especially like young teenagers who their mental and stamina and concentration ability is sort of diminished over the years. And so it's like we're sort of bending the knees, becoming subservient to technology, which is sort of now on a trajectory of its own. I like to think that Bitcoin is sort of an outlier, like kind of like what you were saying. It's able to return back to you some of that bandwidth that you don't have to invest it so much in just sort of that 9 to 5 mentality. You can kind of go back to focusing on like what's right in front of you, being present. I know the last few months, some people know this, I got let go from my job, and I had a peace of mind. First and foremost, just I'm a person of faith. I believe there's a higher power, and I believe in God, and that He ordained this to happen, right? So I find peace in that. But there was also like just this real world, tangible, like, man, thank God I have some Bitcoin because like I've been able to save in a money that appreciated in value. And so I sort of like think like that's sort of like that bandwidth that returned to me. Like it wasn't like this frantic, oh my gosh, what am I going to do tomorrow? So I like to think that Bitcoin is a little bit of an outlier just from what I was describing with the whole thing about technology and us becoming, we're the ones changing to it. But what do you think about that whole concept about us as humans modifying ourselves to serve the needs of technology? And is Bitcoin potentially an exception to that?
So in regards to innovation and technology, I think we're naturally inclined to innovate and look for better ways of doing things, right? You could use a rock to try to hammer a nail, or you could, build a hammer. You could forge a piece of steel or iron. We created tools. We improved our circumstances, and that's just going to continue forever. That's like innate to us. There's a great book by Matt Ridley called How Innovation Works, kind of describes this process throughout time. We're always innovating because we're always looking for better ways to do it. We solve our own problems, and then in many cases, that problem or that solution can be scaled to other people, and it doesn't take away from me inventing a hammer and someone else then replicating it doesn't take away from the usefulness it provides to me. So it's this positive sum game, which then creates, that is how wealth is created. I kind of see this whole shortened attention span phenomena just purely being a late stage fiat phenomena. It's just this gross misallocation of resources and, human potential, because the companies that maybe are creating the products that are causing some of the challenges or problems or addictions that, you're describing, they're also trapped in this quarterly earnings report cycle of having to try to outpace inflation. So they're just continually optimizing, trying to monetize, and trying to, take as much attention as possible. And they're competing with each other, right? So it's very nefarious. If you look at the best and brightest, where if I even just take my own, say graduating business school class, and where did they go upon graduation, and what are they doing now? And, if I thought about what would they be ideally suited for based on their skills and passion and interests versus what were the incentives offered to them, in terms of, say, from big consulting firms, banks, tech companies, and what they're working on now. And it's really just fiat incentives, because they're also then, trying to afford having a family and, a home to live in, which has also been financialized because of the fiat system. So I just think it's like perverse incentives that are unfortunate, but temporary. And it's just going back to time preference, right? If you're thinking in fiat terms, everything's going to be more expensive in the future. Your time is getting worth less and less and less over into the future. It's just the opposite of what sound money does to you in terms of how you make calculations about how you spend your time, about opportunity cost. So if you look at the businesses that Bitcoiners are building or running, and look at what kind of time horizon are they looking at? Do they care about quality, or do they care about the next quarterly earnings report? So I would counter to say, yeah, it's purely a fiat phenomena that we're kind of seeing.
Yeah, there's a hyper emphasis on the present with all of that you sort of see. It's when, I mean, just you see it in other realms too. Like you can see it in religion, you see it in just people having an awakening, but you do see it in the Bitcoin space a lot. Sort of this shift, people moving their emphasis from focusing on the present to a long term. Like I can't tell you how many Bitcoiners I've met at meetups that are trying to improve their diets. They're trying to get into reading more, and even podcasts. Like if you look at somebody who can listen to a 2-hour podcast with intentionality versus somebody who might still be in front of a screen, but they are just doom scrolling 3 or 4 seconds at a time. I would say that that's an improvement, right? It displays that you have some mental stamina. And so, yeah, you see that with Bitcoin all the time. And because Bitcoin sort of like it is this new set of rules that gets imposed, right? So maybe that is the us changing as a result of a new technology, but it's sort of changing in a way that's it's an improvement, not necessarily like a negative. And it's like a return to maybe how people used to be. I think people from the centuries before had higher capabilities of concentration. People were more literate. And I mean, I'm not saying everything was better back then, but at least in terms of the raw ability to think, I think there was that. And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you think of what creates the most amount of noise in our modern day world, in my opinion, a big part of that is the blending of politics and entertainment.
Mm.
And, it's ironic because we met at a conference in DC. There were a lot of senators, representatives from the House there. And one of the benefits of Bitcoin to me is I completely tune out politics. I do not follow politics actively at all, other than maybe how it interacts with Bitcoin, or if there's any Bitcoin specific policies, because that's just purely out of interest from an educational point of view. But I understand what I hold. I have certainty long term. Short term noise has no impact on that. So then what would I choose to focus my time on? Well, then I want to learn the timeless stuff. I want to, talking about meeting Bitcoiners who are interested or taking a greater interest in their diet and what they're consuming. Well, that's a lifelong skill. You're really looking out into the future because you want to be around 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now and in good health and good standing reputationally with others to actually enjoy the benefits of, future appreciation in your wealth. So it's really interesting how it all ties together.
Yeah, no, definitely. So was that a conscious decision that you made to sort of cancel out the noise when it comes to politics? Like what led up to that decision? Did you follow politics pretty closely before all that?
I just thought about when I have an interaction with someone, what is an enjoyable interaction generally? Or look at, if I was looking at the people I would consider, say, angriest in my immediate circle, what were they angry about? And more often than not, they were angry about some aspect of politics or something they saw on the news, which didn't maybe immediately affect them in any way, but they felt they'd been programmed to be outraged about a certain thing. So I just didn't see it adding any benefit to the people I love and care about in my life. And then I tried the experiment on myself, and I honestly didn't notice any difference. By tuning it out, I wasn't missing anything. I didn't feel any less, up to date with the state of the world. So it was a very easy decision then to just say, okay, that's great. I can tune out this whole noisy part of society and I'm not losing anything. I get all this time back. So maybe going back to thinking of the time you have in a day, what is stealing attention away from that? Okay, doom scrolling is one. Okay, can I cut that out if it's not having any positive impact on my life? And you kind of go through that checklist. And what you're left with is things you're intentionally choosing out of interest, things that are going to help you down the line. Okay, what am I eating? Am I exercising? And it's just very empowering. You just feel a greater sense of control.
Yeah. I I think this is something I have experienced and maybe other people do as well. I think this largely due to a fiat mindset, but like this desire to be productive, right? Which is an incredibly satisfying feeling. But we are so present minded that we actually don't know what to do to feel productive. And so we will settle for scrolling or getting entertainment from a Reddit post or like an X post, and it it sort of very temporarily checks the box of productivity. But because I think it's like we don't know where to start for a longer project, and every time that's happened to me, I'm left with a feeling of remorse that I did not redeem my time.
Hmm.
And so, what do you do to redeem your time on any given day? And I don't know what your schedule is like, if you're occupied from 9 to 5 with a very obvious task, or maybe you have some freedom to your days, because that's kind of where the trouble can come in, is like to be disciplined enough if you do have some freedom built into your schedule to redeem the time. So what do you do?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. I recognize that some people operate really well having a lot of structure in their day. I do not. I like maximum flexibility and minimal commitment. So I intentionally have very, very empty calendar as much as possible, other than family commitments. And, I've written a couple of books now, and that process, there's not really a clear blueprint of how to do that. It's usually a year, multi-year process. You kind of have to figure it out along the way. So there's no point in trying to look productive or appear productive because it just doesn't contribute to the final product. The final product is a result of lots of sitting around, thinking, false starts. It's like doing a maze and you're constantly going back
Hmm.
to the start, which from a distance looks, like you're wasting time basically. So yeah, creative work is very different in that sense. That from the outside, I'm sure a lot of people over the years have watched me and thought, what's this guy doing? But there's just, I recognize now that that's just part of the process. And it gives me a lot of anxiety sometimes during it because you're like, oh, is this going to work out? Is this the right direction? Should I be doing more? Like you said, should I be like doing more research or reading more or having more interviews with people to do research? But I've now kind of settled into this rhythm where I trust my own judgment. And, you know, for me, creativity comes from just having a huge amount of freedom and optionality to kind of just go with whatever kind of mood or energy level I'm in at any point in time, which is very difficult with kids,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I've never written a book, and so I wouldn't know the first thing, but I can imagine the word you used is false starts. Yeah, I think one good thing is like, and this is not a habit I've practiced every day, but at the beginning of a day, making a list. Like it can be just that simple sometimes, and resisting the urge to get on your phone, or if you're gonna get on your phone and check Twitter or X, try to remember the purpose. We are so full of distractions today that you can grab your phone, and by the time you're actually on it, you've forgotten what the actual reason you went to your phone was. And it's like, so, but yeah, making a list and just that to me is like one of the best ways. And so, I am the type of person where I want to see some sort of progress being made, but I also want to like detox from the amount of time I spend online. And so doing something outside, just accomplishing some of those really necessary but simple tasks that are sometimes they're hard. They're simple but hard. Like just recently, I started making some shelves. Like I'm not a crafty guy. I don't work with wood, but I was like, man, I want to like bring something into creation, to sort of feel like I redeemed my time and learned something. And so picking up a hobby, I think that is very hands on, where you have to deal in the physical world, I think is a good antidote for fighting against doom scrolling or just that feeling of like where you're not being productive. I think I think that is one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah.
Do you have any hobbies like that are very hands-on or physical?
Not really, but I'm a big believer now in creating things, creating like a product. So whether that's, building shelves or, or even cooking something, like having a
Yeah,
goal in mind, setting out to create it and then have it, you know, actually look at the final product. It's incredibly satisfying. And I think,
yeah,
more people should do it, or orient their work to that way. Because if you don't ever stand back and look at what you created, uh, there's not really much feedback of, you know, did you enjoy that? Is it something you're proud of? What would you do differently next time? There's a lot of information in that process. So I think, yeah, more and more people should do it because otherwise, yeah, like you said, you do get stuck just consuming, just
mhm,
scrolling. And that's not to say anything negative about individuals. I think you have to recognize that there are a huge cohort of very bright people spending all of their working hours trying to get you addicted to these
yeah,
products, apps. I have a very bright friend and she was working for Netflix. And I remember going to visit her once. I was traveling through Europe and she was in Amsterdam and we were chatting and we were talking about Netflix, their competitors at the time. I'm like, oh, so would you guys really competing with, I can't remember, like Prime or Disney Plus? And she's like, no, our competitor is all of your other free time. That's who we're fighting against.
yeah.
And
Like
that,
sleep is even one of them. They're competing against people's sleep,
yes, yes. So when
trying
you
to get you to
recognize,
stay up later to hit one more episode. They show you the trailer at the very end. What happens next, or they leave you on a cliffhanger to get you to stay up later because the only time that we have available is like 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning when most people are asleep. So they have to use that time.
yep,
I wouldn't
exactly.
be surprised if eventually a lot of the people who are in sort of like the biohacking industry try to develop a product where humans don't need to sleep anymore.
I completely agree. I think you're right. I think that's the next. The first one was obesity. And you look at all the drugs that have come out around that. Yeah, if you can tackle sleep next, I think
Yeah, what if
we'll be perfectly optimized, right?
yeah, 24 hours of productivity, you take this drug and it I don't know what it would do, but like I think like dolphins, they can put one half of their brain to sleep at a
Oh,
time.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
they're
you're
never
right.
actually completely asleep and they can rest one side, but maybe they could figure out a way to hack that and humans never sleep and now you can watch as much Netflix as possible.
There you go. Yeah. The ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's crazy. As we kind of wrap up here, what are you working on now? Are you working on another book? What can people kind of look forward to?
So right now, there's been a lot of demand for different languages.
Okay.
You as you're a Spanish speaker. The Treasury of Michael Saylor just came out in Spanish a few days
Nice.
ago, and there's about 6 or so languages in the works right now, which should be out later this year or early next. So right now, that is the goal to get all these different languages out.
That's cool. And your work is free. You've talked about that, and so how can people
Yeah.
find a free ebook or find your stuff?
So head to my X profile. Anil said so. You can download both my books for free in digital format, and I've created hundreds of um, educational Bitcoin slides over the years and infographics. If you're ever giving a talk at a meetup or a conference, or even just educating your friends and family, I've made all the slide decks. So just go and steal them just take them, use them. Hopefully it makes your life easier as you teach your loved ones about Bitcoin.
Well, Anil, it's absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you very much for your time. And I know you're only a few hours away from where I live, and so maybe we can get you to come out here for a meetup sometime.
Yeah, would love to. Matthew, thanks again for the invite. Great to chat again. And yeah, great to hang out in DC.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Bye.